it really is the end of the world as we know it. They're queering nuclear warheads. Josh, I'm very happy to have met you. It's been an honor. I think that the world is coming to an end.
I'm almost grateful for it at this point. If the nuke has a rainbow flag on it, I'm past caring anymore, Just nuke me already.
Yeah, they didn't. I'm sad to say that they didn't put the DI away. DI has gone nuclear.
Yeah, the woke has not been put away.
Yeah. So there's a question of, what to do in the meantime. One good idea would be to donate to Lotus Seeders.
In your final minutes.
The final minutes, yeah, check this on your bucket list. You could consider donating or becoming a subscriber on a website. That could, that could be a good...
It'd be a good way to go out, wouldn't it?
Good way to go out.
Go out with, a final middle finger to the people that do you wrong.
Yeah. So, Tsar Bomba shouldn't be misgendered, ladies and gentlemen.
Tsarina Bomba now.
Yeah. You don't know.
That's true.
We don't know. We're not going to say anything. We have a tweet here from Kaneko the Great. One of the Biden-Harris administration's latest Department of Energy hires has called for the queering of nuclear weapons. The meme becomes real life. And we have here, for those who listen to us, we have a nuclear warhead with the trans symbol.
That's an old picture, by the way.
Yeah, and the Black Lives Matter. Yeah, no, that's not a recent one, but it's a meme that they actually did it.
Yes.
And you see, it's also funny, but after a while, this segment will get absolutely harrowing. You will be very scared. Very scared. Right. Now, here we have this from the Department of Energy from the US. It welcomes new appointees from the Biden-Harris administration and announces promotions. This is in February 7, 2024. Now, you would say that the number one problem of the US Department of Energy has nothing to do with energy. It has to do with diversity. Wouldn't you say that, Josh?
Yeah, I think that actually making the United States energy independent again after, Biden stopped it being so is less important than having people of the right skin colour occupy government positions.
Well, diversity is some people's strength, let's say. It says here, the US Department of Energy today announced 5 new Biden-Harris administration appointees joining the team to work alongside US Secretary of Energy Jennifer McGranholm in combating climate change and helping the United States achieve President Biden's ambitious clean energy goals. With these new hires and recent promotions, DOE appointees continue to make up a historically diverse team with 60% women, 57% people of color, and 25% of staff identifying as LGBTQ+. I would say that that's a lot. That's a lot.
That is a lot, yeah.
It isn't at all.
It's proportionate, actually.
It doesn't reflect the population. So when you have something like that, you can't be saying that we need more of people from these minorities to make the department more representative.
It's also
actually less.
It's also worth mentioning America was energy independent under the Trump administration, and now it's got 60% women, 57% people of colour, and 25% of the staff identifying as LGBTQ+. It's now not energy independent.
The Department of Energy boasts an incredible group of appointees, and these 5 new additions and the stellar cohort taking on the new roles are no exception. Now, we are going to talk about one particular appointee going by the name Sneha Nair, Special Assistant,
Bless you.
Thank you. National Nuclear Security Administration. Prior to Nair's appointment, she was a research analyst with the Nuclear Security Program at the Stimson Center, where she led on insider threat mitigation, bias in human reliability programs, and implications of emerging technologies. And she was also, I think she holds an MA in Geography and International Relations from the University of St. Andrews in the UK, Josh.
Is that going to be in some way related to what happens here?
I don't know. But you will see, okay? Because what is happening is harrowing. And you see, her suggestion is that queer studies are required to solve national security issues.
Of course.
You heard it correctly. Queer studies are required for solving national security issues. We have here from Fox News, a recent hire at the nuclear security wing of the DOE has previously called for disarmament policies which reduce or eliminate nuclear weapons, arguing that advancing queer theory was essential to that agenda as well as important to America's national security. How does this sound? The queer theory is required for addressing nuclear for a policy for the Department of Energy. Somehow, someone in the nuclear division said we need to queer this department.
Well, the only thing I can think of, and this is only because I've done I've studied Freudian psychoanalysis, is a nuclear missile is a phallic object, and they're laying claim to it. They're just like, hey, that's our culture. This phallic missile that belongs to us.
Yeah,
we want it. We want to sit on it or something.
Nuclear warheads are white supremacist. They're white supremacists, okay? Tsar Bomba was a white supremacist.
That's a bit awkward, isn't it? Because Pakistan has nuclear weapons.
Well, it doesn't matter because they don't care about anything about non-Western threats, as you will see. Because I have here the report that this person has authored along with other people, and she says some really harrowing stuff about things like that. Now, here she says, Nair believes in eradicating purported white supremacy in the nuclear field, as well as queering nuclear weapons as part of a DI push she believes is essential for deterring threats to nuclear energy facilities in the US. You really can't make this up. I think honestly, that the deliberate nonsense is the goal. It's like, with people who are innocent and they're being dragged to courts, the process is the punishment. And that's what is happening.
Is the punishment.
We are being punished with this nonsense.
Okay.
The whole process is punishment via nonsense. Finally, queer theory informs the struggle for nuclear justice and disarmament, she wrote last year. Queer theory helps to shift the perception of nuclear weapons as instruments for security by telling the hidden stories of displacement, illness, and trauma caused by the production and testing. One thing to bear in mind is that there was an unfortunate incident, I think it was called the Chernobyl disaster, that shows what happened when people who are absolutely unqualified to be around nuclear energy were around nuclear energy. So you might as well check on this.
So also implicit in this is that somehow weapons of, mass destruction are sort of heterosexual, masculine. It's sort of bigging them up in a sort of unintentional way by saying queer theory informs the struggle to nuclear justice and disarmament. Well, if the opposite of being queer is to be straight, then you've also got to be in favour of nuclear weapons, and therefore nuclear weapons are imbibed with heterosexualism, masculinity.
You've seen all the movies where they have the bombs and they paint them with sharks. So what I think they should do is where they have the lips under the eyes, they should put lipstick.
What they need to do is paint the nuclear bombs a bit like in Silence of the Lambs, Buffalo Bill.
Yeah.
Make them look like that. That will really represent the people who are trying to push this.
So there's a problem with all these bias studies and bias training is that, Josh, I think you will understand what I'm saying, is it always curious that people who are talking about bias for some reason think that a huge government, a huge state that is constantly expanded isn't going to be fueled by biased people. For some reason, bias is something that only critics of leftism have.
Well, bias is in everyone. It's impossible not to be biased. There's no such thing as true objectivity from an individual. You can only be subjective because you are a human being that is alive in the world and you have wants and needs.
Oh, this was the ideology behind the 5-year plans in the Soviet Unions. They knew better. They were the only ones who were bias-free. Right, so we have here a link to the report, and we have some people criticizing her about the study, starting with a predetermined thesis that biases within nuclear security frameworks, particularly in the context of DI, pose serious risks, things that a normal person would say. And here we have this report that she is the main author, along with some other people. You see down. Now, this is a very harrowing report that if we read parts of, we will see that basically there is something really bad going on here. And things are really out of control. So we have here about the program, they're saying nuclear security program, incentivizing the development of stronger comprehensive nuclear security standards to reduce the risk posed by nuclear terrorism. And what you'll see in a nutshell, what they're doing with this report, they're saying essentially that what they're going to push for, the agenda that they're going to push for in the Department of Energy and in the nuclear sector, is the agenda that says that if you think that the major threats to US security come from outside the US, then you're a racist. What you need to refocus is on the domestic far right. That's exactly what this report is about. And I have to show you here some parts from the executive summary and some from it. Says frameworks for insider threats and personnel reliability and surety programs must be able to adapt to evolving risk factors and nuclear security challenges.
So what they're effectively saying here then is that they hate their own country more than any external enemy. That they're more willing to use nuclear weapons against their own people than any external enemy that might have them.
It's not necessarily using nuclear weapons against people domestically. Okay. I wouldn't say that that's it. Okay. I don't think that that's it. But I think that what is going on is that there is a massive effort to exclude 9/11 from all the studies of what are the major terrorist threats.
Well, Islam is number one.
Yes, but they're excluding it from the new reports, and because they want to propagate the narrative that everything boils down to the far right, and the major threat is the far right. And if you don't think that the major threat is the far right, you're a racist, and you need to be removed from the department to make room for more people who are gonna espouse queer theory for nuclear weapons.
I'm pretty sure that every country in the Northern Hemisphere has experienced some form of Islamic terror. Yeah. I mean, that isn't an official factoid, but just from my coverage of it from all these years, it seems like I can call to mind an example from, North America all the way to Russia and in between, right?
Yeah. And second sentence, it says, in the post-9/11 security environment, foreign, largely Islamic extremist non-state actors were understood to pose the greatest threat to nuclear facilities and security practitioners. Today, domestic violence extremists, many with white supremacist ideological roots, pose a growing and perhaps still underappreciated threat. So what they're saying is that it's white supremacist and racist and obsolete to speak of Islamic terrorism as being the number one threat in the US. What you need to do is to focus on the far right that they almost never define. And unless you do so, you are actually a far right white supremacist racist who needs to be removed.
This is like the Rosenbergs, the people who infiltrated the US government and then sold nuclear secrets to the Soviets. This is that level of treachery, what they're doing here.
Yeah. It continues here. It gets even more harrowing. I honestly thought that this was going to be a fun segment, but it's not. This research paper examines how structural and personal bias perpetuate problematic and antiquated constructs of who or what constitutes a nuclear security threat, create a blind spot in security screening procedures and personnel surety program amidst a fast-changing security environment, and lie at the root of persistent diversity, equity, and inclusion issues at nuclear facilities. It argues that the development of a DI nuclear security culture is not only a sustainable solution to these challenges, but critical to strengthening the nuclear security of the country.
I bet she's probably going to argue next, you know what, there aren't enough people from Russia, from China, from Iran that have access to the nuclear codes, the launch codes. There needs to be equity in this.
Yeah. You know what? So what they're doing is with this department of nuclear weapons and Department of Energy, they're trying to do what they did with the police, for instance. In the BLM, everyone will say defund the police. It's a racist institution. It's an institution full of people who have a particular culture infested by whiteness, internalized or not, or essential, that makes people judge risks mistakenly. That's exactly what they're doing here with external threats. They're saying that there is a culture that is white supremacist within the nuclear department and within the national security department. There's a white supremacist culture that creates the bias of thinking that external threats are really important and should be addressed. So what this report says, well, we're going to basically force you to out of this bias. And Biden and Harris just appointed this person there. And they say the same thing here. They say after January 6th, attack on the U.S. Capitol building served as a catalyst for renewed attention on insider threats and domestic violence extremists as national security priorities. It's obsolete to care about what happened in 2001. And they're talking about the whole culture of how threats are being assessed. But I want to show you just two more things before we move on that indicate that the people who are writing here, they really seem to me to be exactly DI hires, and they don't seem to me to have the necessary, how should I say, CV to be in positions that you could say are almost military positions.
Well, these people not only are morons, but are traitors to their country. And I don't think they're qualified to run a lemonade stand.
Yeah, and they are using the queer theory and all this woke garbage and the intersectional nonsense in order to portray a threat as a construct. Now, this isn't something that a serious person would say. She's writing, or the authors are writing, historically, the domestic construct of a threat was antithetical to the idea of an American. Threats are threats. They're not constructs. They're not mental constructions. They're threats. This is precisely what a DI hire for a bad sociology department teaching position would write like. As if threats and all these are constructs. So if we just change the language, the construct is going to go away.
Why don't we apply that to something else? Well, racism's just a construct, bro.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, what's the problem? It's just a construct.
Yeah. Just change the word, and there's going to be no racism. Change the meaning of racism.
It's just a construct. What's the problem?
Exactly. So here we have. It's honestly like a queer theorist writing. I mean, they say this. It says, this othering of non-white and otherwise non-American presenting individuals may reinforce problematic biases in national and nuclear security frameworks, creating an us versus them dynamic. This is the most idiotic sentence I have ever read. In these positions, you need to bear in mind who is thinking in an us versus them dynamic. It's just facts.
Well, us versus them is fundamental to viewing foreign policy.
Yeah.
Let alone nuclear strategy and all of that other stuff. You complete morons. Yeah.
This is absolutely moronic, but it's dangerous because that's the issue, that widespread stupidity is a national security threat. It is a national security threat.
No, these people should never have been allowed anywhere.
I mean, this is like Derrida writing, this othering of non-white and other... the othering, and then they have here the other thing. They say this construct of threat as other in national and nuclear security can be clearly seen in how insider threats to nuclear facilities and organizations have historically been identified as primarily foreign threats, often those of Middle Eastern descent or background. Sorry. I mean, you can't make it up. It's just, you can't make it up.
Mm-hmm. I can't believe this. I knew it was going to be bad from what you told me beforehand, but I hadn't actually read this, and my goodness, is it more shocking than I could have possibly guessed.
Yeah, and obviously they have to talk about more DI hires, brainwashed activists. They say the nuclear field has historically lacked diversity and fallen short in ensuring equity and inclusion for all stakeholders. I mean, the numbers that we were given 25% LGBTQ, 60% women, and 57% of black origin aren't exactly suggesting non-inclusion. They're suggesting over-representation.
I'm reminded of No Country for Old Men when Anton Chigurh says, I can't remember exactly what he says, but the basic sentiment is, if all of your life's decisions got you to where you are, what was the point in making those particular decisions? That same thing.
I think that this is basically the tipping point. This is the latest fashion of the woke trend, is queering nuclear energy and queering, weapons and the army. In a much stronger sense than before, because you could say that there are already DEI initiatives within the army. But I think that this is just something more. And I think now it's a good time to remind people and also communicate to people that the DEI nonsense isn't about liberation. A lot of people are just focusing on the slogan of DEI hires, who are constantly saying we need to liberate people, and to liberate people we need to represent their minorities, on all this stuff. DEI is an absolute tool of domination in the workforce and in the case of civil society. And I will end up with discussing these two cases, because I think that this absolute nonsense is just a national security threat on the one hand, and it is essentially the end of the rule of law. It is tyranny. It is arbitrary rule with a facade of legitimacy. And for instance, think of it in the workforce. If you suddenly fill your workforce with DEI rules, you have rules that are so subjective, which means that the person who is entrusted with enforcing those rules, the DEI officer, has arbitrary power over everyone.
Well, that's why everything is subjective, is that it grants the people who decide upon the rules more power.
Exactly. And this, you can see here from the rabbit hole, 74.7% of respondents reported that workplace DEI policies cause division and contention. They're absolutely designed to create division and contention, because their whole idea is based on division. And it actually leads to the domination of workers within their workforce. And we can talk about the same thing in civil society now and wrap it up. The same thing that happens in the workplace, where rules are being more subjective, and that gives arbitrary power to those who have the power to enforce the rules, comes with also politics, and in the case of civil society. And what we're looking at is a very organized attempt to demoralize people, make us think that to attack common sense. That's why we have all the nonsense with portraying crossing over a pride mural as being a transphobic hate crime. Meanwhile, there are just a stabbing spree throughout Europe and the Western world, and everyone is focusing on the transphobic crime. So that's an attack on common sense. So there's an attack on common sense, there's an attack on civil society, there's an effort to guilt shame people. And we have here this person saying that there are 10 ways you're saying the N-word without actually saying it. And she's talking about phrases like diversity hire, anti-racist, race grifter, stuff like that. And race baiter. No.
Shut up.
This is absolutely race grifting and race baiting nonsense. So, no, we will say this. It is race grifting nonsense.
If you don't agree with us 100%, you are racist.
Yeah, but imagine now if Biden and Harris come along and take someone who thinks like that, and they put her in charge of the nuclear security agency or any department that has to do with nuclear weapons, and you're trying to say, listen, there are facts, there are people who are posing threats to the nation, there are threats to national security, and you have someone like that who has undergone the bias training of Sneha Nair coming and telling you, well, you're a racist, you're a white supremacist, you need to be removed. This is suicidal empathy, and queering nuclear weapons is an absolute catastrophe, and it shouldn't be taken lightly.
I hope you appreciated that segment from the podcast to the Lotus Eaters, and if you want to see what else we're putting out, here we have a roundtable on the riots in England, and this is a premium video for subscribers. And if you are interested in supporting us other than subscribing, you can also donate And if you want to see all the work we're putting out, we also post links to that on Twitter. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.